definition. Resolve. People should have the right to be forgotten by search engines. I'm going to go through a quick definition, a weighing mechanism, and then on to our three contentions. First of all, we want to talk about the definition of forgotten. What exactly does this mean? There's strong precedent for this idea in the European Union right now. What happens is that a particular embarrassing photo, whatever it is, whatever information it is that people want to be forgotten, isn't taken down from the internet completely, but you can tell Google to not associate that with your name. So if you Google the name James Capuzzi, and James doesn't want a picture of him doing something ridiculous showing up, then he can have Google not index that on his search. That's a system we would use here in the United States. We think it works well. As for the weighing mechanism, we're going to do cost-benefit analysis for disenfranchised groups. We think that you should prefer this as a judge because these are groups who particularly deserve our consideration, particularly deserve our protection. If we care about equality, if we care about everyone having equal access to all sorts of things, then we should pay particular attention to disenfranchised groups. And we'll go through three specific groups in our contentions. The first one is the unemployed. Obviously, these people don't have jobs, they have fewer financial resources, that is an issue for them. This is a very, very clear reason why this is helpful. It removes embarrassing things from your internet history, from things you've done in the past, from coming up in search engines by particular employers. If there's something that you've done, if you've been involved in a business that you want to be associated with, there's a picture of you, maybe you're in college, maybe you're underage and you have some alcohol, you don't want people seeing that, you can make it so that Google doesn't do that, Google doesn't bring that up when someone comes up with your name. And that's going to help you get a job because it gives you the chance to actually demonstrate your qualifications. It gives you a chance to go in for an interview, say, I'm qualified for this job because of this. I can do this for you. I want to bring this to the organization. That's something that we want for people. We want anyone who's unemployed, who maybe has this thing in their past, to still have the opportunity to present their best selves, to present the best version of themselves. Yes?
To clarify, are you advocating that individuals have the right to have search engines not recognize their name, or can they also just delete anyone's name from?
Just their name. So I, Tim Dakotas, can say that is a thing out there that pops up when someone Googles my name. It needs to not come up when people Google my name. Because if you're applying for a job or whatever that is, it's going to be related to that. Now the second piece under this unemployed, you don't even have to be someone with a potentially difficult internet history. This is going to create a lot of new digital jobs. This is a service that will need to be run by Google. There are people who will need to go through this process to say, so-and-so sent in an application for this, they want this piece removed, they need to go through and they need to make sure that the software is handling that properly. So even if you're not someone who has an internet history of like this, something that you want removed, it's still going to benefit you if you're unemployed. There are going to be more jobs out there. Obviously that's just a supply and demand kind of thing. And that helps this disadvantaged population. Now, moving on to our second tension, it's all about gender politics. So this helps people who are disenfranchised because of their gender. The first group is transgender people. Allowing internet search results to be forgotten, allowing certain things from someone's past to be forgotten, allows people to not be associated with bodies and names that they don't identify with any longer. If there are pictures of you out there, if there are instances of you going under a different name because of something you identified with in the past, that will go away. That is something that you can have removed if you so choose. It eliminates or helps to cut back on the use of dead names and names that someone used in the past, because these things can be very traumatic for people. If you're going through this experience, it's obviously a difficult thing. Living as a transgender person, if you've transitioned, if you're identifying by a different gender than the one you were born with, then allowing people to live that identity fully and not have to deal with people using their former name, using a former identity, whatever that is, that's very, very important. Additionally, this is particularly important for women. A huge, huge problem we see on the internet right now is the idea of revenge porn. People post images of their ex-girlfriends online as a way to get revenge for them, get revenge on them, say, look at this naked picture I have, everybody laugh at her, and this is particularly linked to that person's name. This does no good if it's not linked to that person's name. It's not embarrassing if it's just a naked picture of someone. It has to be linked to this specific individual. So again, this is something that you can have removed if these images of you are out there somewhere. This is something that's hurting you either in your search for employment or just in general life. This isn't something you want being exposed. This is something you can have removed. And that particularly helps women because they are disproportionately the target of revenge porn. And again, this is a disenfranchised population, someone that we should be particularly considering helping out, giving an extra edge, helping them to be more equal in society. Moving on to our last contention, that's all about criminalization. One of the biggest things, everyone kind of cites in this thing, is past criminal behavior. If you've done something in your past, a criminal act, that will probably show up on a search engine. And that's not something that you want. If you're trying to get a job, if you're trying to reconnect with society, if you're trying to even make friends or anything, you don't want people necessarily knowing that you've had this criminal behavior in the past. Obviously, it's something incredibly, incredibly serious, like you've murdered someone, you're going to be in jail anyways. If you've raped someone, if you're a sex offender, you're going to be on those registries anyways. But we're looking at sort of minor things here that don't really mean that someone's a bad person. Someone makes a mistake, that's fine, that's something that's happened in the past, we can move on in society. This allows people to do that. In particular, it decreases recidivism. The idea behind recidivism is that people are more likely to go back to prison if they've done it once, because they have this idea in their head that they are a criminal, that they will always be treated as a criminal, that society can never see them as having redeemed themselves, so they go right back to criminal behavior, and they go right back to prison, and the cycle continues. This decreases that. This gives them the chance to have a new start, to put a past conviction behind them, to say, that was the old me, that is something that I did, that was a mistake, something I shouldn't have done, but it doesn't define who I am, and that's what's really, really key here. Obviously, anyone who's been convicted of a crime is a disenfranchised group. They're people who are distant from society. They've been literally physically away from society for a while, but they're also kind of socially marginalized. They're socially pushed away, and that's not something that we want. We want to help this disenfranchised population. We want to help them redeem themselves by being a participating member of society again. When these people have served their time, they have the right to move on to start a new life. And in particular, going beyond just this group of people in general who have had past criminal behavior, this particularly targets African Americans and Latinos. We know that African American, Latino, and other minority populations are disproportionately convicted of crimes, disproportionately put in prison in this country. That's simply a fact. When you help people who have been convicted of crimes, that group in general, you disproportionately then help minority populations because they're the group that is mostly represented in this population. So again, that's sort of a subgroup under this, but it still is a disenfranchised group that you're helping out here by allowing people to present themselves how they want to be presented, go to the world, see and have the world see them as they should be seen. And with that, I close, and I encourage you to vote for the government.
Thank the Speaker for his case, and now call the Honorable Leader of the Opposition to open the case and preside out.
All right, everyone good to go? So thank the judge, thank my opponents, thank my partner. Get right into it. We're going to go off case and then on to the on case. So we're talking about this idea of freedom of information, and we're going to talk about this forgotten definition, and that this idea that individuals have the right to take it down. That's completely fine. We're going to accept that for now. We're going to move into the debate with everything accepted on the government side regarding definition. So what we're talking about with regards to freedom of information is this idea of people have a right to that. They have a right to the freedom of information, and they have a right to this public domain. Once that information is up there, other people have a right to be able to see that, have a right to be able to view that based on the freedom of information, based on the freedom of being able to see that kind of information in the first place. And when you give people the ability to take this down kind of willy-nilly, when they said in the POI, they're giving this ability for any individual to take down any piece of information they so choose. It sets a really dangerous precedent for these people. It sets a dangerous precedent with regards to this public domain no longer being something that is actually neutral, being something that is actually open to all people. It's something that is now filtered. And when you make it all individuals, when you make it these different people, if they're not just focusing, it's really important for this debate that we don't just think of the person who had one embarrassing incident happen to them in their life and they want to remove that one incident, someone who's otherwise a good guy. We have to be thinking of this also in terms of people that maybe are actually pretty terrible people and have done a multitude of things, so they can get rid of the entirety of that with this being ability forgotten. Not right now, I'm sorry. So that sets a very dangerous precedent with regards to making the internet more of a thing that is filtered, which is something we do not want. The internet is one of the few forums available to us that has this general lack of filtration regarding what you can see, what you can find, the amount of information you're able to find, the sheer quantity of it, yes.
When two people's rights come into conflict, how do you decide whose rights to prioritize?
So I'm sure you're going to be linking this back to your second contention regarding the genders, and you're linking this back to the other things that you're talking about, but it's not about the priority of people's rights being involved. It's about the fact that these individuals can take down this vast amount of information that the public has a right to see. The public has a right to be able to view that information and get what they can from it, regardless. So in certain cases, I'm sure the rights of the individual to take down a certain piece of information is fine, but when you make it this broad, when you make it this grand, it has a negative impact. This is a horrible precedent. Also, moving on to our second contention is this idea of this, it generally lowers the quality and the usability of the internet overall. So when you have this kind of filtration, when you have this idea that you're not going to be able to find everything associated with a certain item, with a certain individual, based on just typing a name, based on typing in certain information you know about them, it lowers the quality of the internet, lowers the speed in which you can search things, it lowers the general way that you can do something. It's like running everything you do on the internet on like safe search, and you don't have anything that is saved there. Because when things are being able to be forgotten, it opens up this door for not just individuals being able to take things down, but for companies to be able to remove certain things, that are very helpful, that you want to be remembered for on the internet, things that you want to have available to you, like your username and password, like certain information, credit card information to make purchases easier, things that you want to have there that could now be taken down based on this right to be forgotten in that sense. Yes, Tim?
How much time on the internet do you spend Googling the names of private citizens?
Oh, but with regards to this debate, it just, when you're talking about how when you're looking at these private citizens, you're also looking at, you have to also look at this idea of the corporations, this idea of greater people involved. Is that people are not just this one individual. People are this, could be groups, could be larger people, could be larger organizations that can now be disassociating themselves with the bad parts of their history to be able to kind of confuse and trick the people that are getting them most of their information online, which we simply do not want as the opposition side. Moving on finally to our third contention is this idea, this general idea of censorship, and we believe as opposition that the ability to have free speech is much higher than that. People shouldn't have the ability to be able to take down certain information that they simply think should not be there, should be filtered, should not be there in the first place. That's going to be a major point. A major point in the debate is that we simply believe that people should have the right to put the things they want on the internet onto the internet. And that furthermore leads to this idea of security and the fact that when certain individuals, and as our PM stated, this is just all these people, any person could do this. You're talking about someone who is a career criminal. You're talking about someone who perhaps could be a danger to the United States, could be a danger to other people around him. They could then remove all of these dangerous elements associated with that, all the dangerous elements associated with a certain group. So when you type up, for example, some gang, when you type up, for example, some terrorist organization, it no longer has these things that they've done that are negative. It only has the positive benefits because they're allowed to take this down. And they kind of hinted slightly at this idea that there's going to be a major process and there's going to be all these Google people looking at all this and approving or declining that. But that's not really what this debate centers on. We're saying that people just have the right to be able to do that and take it down. And if it does go through a screening process, then they don't actually have that right. And that's something that's going to be pretty important when we move on to the government side of the flow. So, which is what I will do now. When we're looking at this, individuals having the right to be forgotten, individuals having the right to disassociate from past events, they're looking at it in terms of one individual. We have to look at it in terms of this, everyone is able to do this. And if they are able to do this, it creates an internet, it creates a system of information that we heavily rely on. It makes it a lot less reliable. It makes it a lot less accurate in a general sense. You're not just removing criminal information, you could be removing anything that you feel you don't really want up there, that no longer is the thing that you want for people to find you on the internet. You're creating this kind of falseness to your person, creating this kind of falseness, and this could be done by bigger groups, could be done by corporations, could be done by terrorist organizations, could be done by any kind of group that wants to kind of rebrand on the internet for someone that only uses that as their source of information. Moving on, the first thing to talk about is the unemployed as one of their disenfranchised groups, and they say that they won't be able to get a job because when you look at their criminal history and when you search that in Google, it comes up and that's a really big deal. But the first thing we have to look at is when you go for any kind of job, even if it's minimum wage job, you have background checks. You give them your social security number and that is immediately looked up and you get your criminal history from that. These companies are not searching your name on Google and finding your criminal history through there. They're finding it through these background checks through social security numbers. So any kind of ads, any kind of disads that might come into play based on your name and criminal activity coming up on Google with regards to jobs, this cannot apply to this debate because you have the social security system, you have this way for people to search your background, to do this at a government level, even at a minimum wage level. When I was working at Dunkin', I gave them my social, they checked me to make sure that could work there based on my criminal record. That's not something that they do on Google. It's not something that these major corporations or even smaller corporations have the legality to just kind of casually search your name on Google and be like, yeah, it looks good, let's hire them. That's not something they want to do, that's not safe. Moving on, and back, so moving on to this idea of the gender politics, idea of the transgender, first moving on to this idea of transgender, this idea of identity on the internet. So, first of all, Carter brought up a good point, we were kind of like talking about this for a second, is that when you type in this new name, type in this new identity, anything associated with that is what's going to come up. That's what's going to be associated with it. When you're typing in this new identity, this new name that you have for yourself, anything that is associated with that during that time is going to come up. What they're talking about seems to be a way of kind of linking two types of what you did believe in the past and what you believe in the future, and kind of linking that under one way of searching. But when you search up one name, you're going to get what is associated with that one name. And when we're talking about this debate, we're talking about forgotten when they say the removal, the disassociation. We can't bring into play this kind of connection idea, this kind of like bridging the gap between identities. That's not going to be a major factor in this debate. Moving on to this idea of revenge porn is that it's really important when you're looking at it on an impact level, is the fact that this does not remove the video in the first place. It just removes the name association. It's not going to happen on the instant that it gets posted. That's simply not the case. That's simply not something that will happen. This video could be up for, even if it's up for days, it will have spread to the degree, and I know that the government knows this, it will spread to the degree that simply removing the name at that point will not have an effect. It will not be able to garner the same amount of impacts as removing the video in the first place. And that's something, yeah, sure, removing the video sounds great, but that's not what this debate is about. Finally, finally they talk about criminal behavior and the idea of this cycle of going back to prison and how that's terrible, and we agree that that's terrible, but with regards to these background checks, with regards to the way the companies do this they don't do it through Google, they don't do it through internet searches, there's no really impact gained by the government. And it sets this kind of precedent for like who has the consent to be able to remove this information, who has the consent to show that, and they only focus on minor crimes, but we also have to make it clear that anyone who is out of jail seemingly has the ability to do this, seemingly has the ability to remove these things, just simply, even if it's a felony type crime. Thank you.
Thank the speaker for his remarks, and then call the honorable member.